What was it like on the set of Little House on the Prairie? The actress who played Michael Landon's wife says it wasn't as wholesome as it seemed.
Guess what me and Andrew found? Where have you been, young lady? You're late. Huh? I asked you where you've been. Well, I was trying to tell you, me and Andrew. Fact is, you're late.
Whether you were an avid follower of Little House on the Prairie program during its original run, or discovered the charm of Laura Ingalls and her family through reruns, the idyllic portrayal of pioneer life may not be as saintly captured behind the scenes. While the show captured the essence of 19th century settler life, there were darker realities lurking off camera. What were some of the shocking scandals in the show? And how did the off-screen experiences contrast with the heartwarming narratives in the show? Join us as we delve into how this scene wasn't edited. Look again at the Little House on the Prairie, pushing Melissa's buttons. Even though Laura Ingalls and Nellie Oleson were depicted as being each other's arch-enemies on the show, the two actors were, in fact, the best of friends off-set. At a later point in the series, Nellie and Percival got married, despite the fact that Steve Tracy, the actor who played Percival, was actually gay. Nellie and Percival's controversial relationship didn't matter much in the show. As often as the two characters could, in a clear attempt at aggravating Melissa Gilbert, they'd passionately make out in front of her. Laura and her love interest Almanzo's love life wasn't nearly as spicy as Nellie's and Percival's, who went out of their way to make their on-screen displays of affection as in her face as possible. Of course, Gilbert, being the youthful and innocent actress she was absolutely agonized by their emotionally insensitive cruelty. Booze and harmful substance. You might be appalled to find out many of the cast and crew members of Little House on the Prairie had some fairly disturbing addictions. Most of these vices involved chemical dependency on booze and harmful substance. As such, it wasn't uncommon to find both on set. Reportedly, the crew polished off 230 racks of Coors every day. Some especially stressful days were even dubbed 3-case days. According to Melissa Gilbert's memoir, Michael Landon was one of the heaviest drinkers on set. He would start off his day with a coffee spiked with liquor and would keep the drinks flowing throughout the rest of the day. Most folks on set had no clue how much he was drinking. He kept it under wraps. But eventually, the full extent of his alcoholism became evident. Michael Landon's true identity. Michael Landon was actually Jewish, even though his character on the show was often seen pushing a Christian message. In real life, he was Jewish. Michael Landon was actually just his stage name. He was born as Eugene Maurice Orowitz. Despite having to play a Christian on screen, Landon didn't find that in conflict with his cultural identity or beliefs. He grew up in New York and New Jersey. His father, Eli Maurice Orowitz, was Jewish, although his mother, Peggy O'Neill, was a practicing Catholic. He was later quoted as saying he took after his father's cultural identity but didn't personally subscribe to any particular religious beliefs. He was a believer in God, but only identified as Jewish in the cultural sense. Landon's dyed hair. Landon's curls were something to marvel at, but if you assumed his lush brunette mane was all natural, you're mistaken. His signature look came from a bottle. His actual hair color was a muted ashy brown. He took his hair color very seriously. He routinely went to a professional stylist to get the dye job done right. Even so, when he started to get some grays, the set lights and natural sunlight would make his dye take on a peculiar purplish hue. Producers would have to call in extra help from professional colorists to fix the issue. Serious issues. Addressed in the show, in general, Little House on the Prairie took on a pretty light-hearted tone. But from time to time, it actually dealt with some pretty risque themes. This was an era where TV was beginning to push the boundaries of what was considered socially and politically acceptable. Sexual assault, drug addiction, racism, prejudice, Adoption and disabilities became frequent topics of consideration for the trailblazing series. Very few programs at the time were willing to touch on these subjects. So, in a way, Little House on the Prairie was ahead of its time. Family matters in the show. On the show, Willie Oleson, played by Jonathan Gilbert, was the younger brother of Nellie. In real life, he was actually the adopted sibling of Melissa Gilbert. Sadly, the two actors are no longer in good standing with each other. They had a falling out after Little House wrapped up. Jonathan went on to get his MBA in finance and is currently working as a stockbroker in New York. Melissa continued working as an actress. She also served as president of the Screen Actors Guild from 2001 to 2005. In 2016, she ran a campaign for a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives for Michigan's 8th Congressional District. Even though she was the presumptive Democratic nominee for her district, she was forced to drop out of the race because of injuries sustained in a 2012 accident. Mary and Laura's relationship. Mary and Laura Ingalls weren't fond of each other. When Melissa Anderson and Melissa Gilbert were still young actresses, they couldn't stand each other. The divide between the two became so fiery that no one else on set even wanted to deal with them. Their feud continued for the whole duration of the series. Can you picture working alongside someone for years on end that you absolutely despise? Well, some people don't have to struggle to imagine such a scenario, as you can probably think of a coworker or two that rubs you the wrong way. But these two young girls not only had trouble getting along, but they were constantly fighting and bickering with each other for 9 years. Good grief, Walnut Grove is a real place. The Ingalls family lived on a small farm near the village of Walnut Grove. Laura Ingalls Wilder, who wrote the original semi-autobiographical book series that the show was based on, had lived in Walnut Grove, Minnesota, for several years of her childhood. Although much of her books were based on other locales that were also significant to her story. The real Walnut Grove was founded in 1874 and incorporated in 1879 and is in Redwood County, Minnesota. The town's fairly tiny, with a population of only 8,006 as of 2019 and a land area of 1 square mile. On-set romances, Little House on the Prairie is one of those rare shows that could never be recreated. The chemistry with its cast was impeccable. The poignant timing of its thematic elements seemed to hit audiences at just the right time, and its setting in rural America left viewers longing for simpler times. It's rumored that a remake film could be in the works, but production seems to have gone cold in the last couple of years. And maybe that's for the best. The Little House series was written by Laura Ingalls Wilder, who intended it as a historical drama to represent her childhood in the Midwest. She lived there between 1870 and 1894 when she was a child. The United States bought much of the Midwest from France in 1803 in an event known as the Louisiana Purchase. However, much of that land was uncharted by Americans and remained unsettled for some time. The practice of homesteading became popular when families moved into the great unknown and built homes on the land. Homesteaders focused entirely on self-sufficiency and built their own homes, grew their own food, and sometimes even produced their own clothes. While the U.S. government romanticized this lifestyle to encourage citizens to begin settling the Midwest, it was a difficult way of living. Laura Ingalls Wilder and her family settled in Kansas when she was just 3 years old, and they faced many hardships. However, Laura learned many things growing up, and it inspired her to write a book series later on in life. The book series was immensely popular across America. It was so popular that a man named Ed Friendly was inspired to create a television series based on the books. After he gained the rights to the books, he wasted no time in producing the series. Little House on the Prairie aired on September 11, 1974. and concluded after 8 seasons on March 10, 1982. A slightly different version of the series, called Little House, New Beginnings, ran the following year. The series was a family favorite in households across America because people loved learning what life was like during the age of pioneers. Even today, children and adults alike love the series. Much of the show's success is owed to the talented cast members. Melissa Gilbert and Michael Landon had a turbulent friendship. Melissa Gilbert played the star of the series, Laura Ingalls, while Michael Landon played Pa Ingalls. When Melissa was only 11 years old, her adopted father ended his life. Although she was told at the time he had suffered a stroke, as a result, Melissa felt she was lacking a father figure. Once she was cast to play Laura Ingalls, however, she found she greatly looked up to Michael Landon. The two grew incredibly close, and Michael Landon even told her he loved her like a father. They engaged in all sorts of antics while the camera crew wasn't filming. However, their relationship took a turn for the worse. Michael divorced his wife to pursue a romantic interest on set, a makeup artist by the name of Cindy Clerico. Melissa, whose parents had divorced when she was only 8, felt betrayed by Michael's decision. She became so angry with him, she cut off all forms of contact. While the two lost their close relationship for some time, Melissa eventually decided it was time to let bygones be bygones. When Michael was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, Melissa made up with him. After his death, she even named one of her children Michael in memory of him. Two rivals on the show were best friends in real life. While Melissa Gilbert played the character Laura, a member of the Ingalls family, actor Allison Arngrim played Nellie, who was a member of the Olesen family in the show. The Ingalls and the Olesens did not get along at all. Laura and Nellie, especially, had an intense rivalry. However, while both actors were great at portraying animosity between each other for the camera, they were best friends in real life. The two spent lots of time together when they weren't busy working, and they got up to all sorts of crazy shenanigans. They were so close, they even had sleepovers at each other's houses. Amazingly, the two young actors who were such close friends were able to act so horribly to each other on screen. They may have been young, but their performances remain a true testament to their talent. Melissa Gilbert had a hard time portraying romance. Even today, young actresses are often cast in romantic roles alongside significantly older men. But this issue was even more prevalent during the production of Little House on the Prairie. This created a particularly uncomfortable situation for Melissa Gilbert, who was just 15 when she had to film her first on-screen kiss, also her first real-life kiss. In the series, Melissa's character Laura marries Almanzo Wilder, played by 23-year-old Dean Butler. The age gap made the experience nerve-wracking for Melissa, who felt uneasy about kissing someone so much older. Unsure of how to handle the situation, she turned to Michael Landon, a close friend and father figure who also served as a director on the show. Understanding her discomfort, Landon took her concerns seriously and brought the issue to the producers. Fortunately, they were receptive to Melissa's feelings and decided to adjust the scene, replacing the kiss with a simple peck on the cheek. Some other cast members made fun of Melissa's innocence. It was no secret Melissa had difficulty portraying her on-screen romance with Dean Butler. While most of the cast members respected this fact so as not to embarrass her, a couple of Melissa's friends and fellow actors thought it was a great way to tease her. Allison Arngrim, who was one of Melissa's best friends, played the character Nellie, who later married another character named Percival. Percival was played by actor Steve Tracy, who was also good friends with Allison. The two decided to play up their romance both on-screen and behind the scenes just to annoy poor Melissa. They engaged in joking, heated makeout sessions to make her uncomfortable. Of course, it was all in good fun. Although Melissa likely felt quite embarrassed, While Steve Tracy and Alison Arngrim had no trouble pretending to be madly in love, the real-life situation could not be further from the truth. While they were great friends, Steve Tracy was gay, and any chance of an on-set romance with Alison was out of the question. Not everyone was friends on set. While Melissa Gilbert and Alison Arngrim were best friends behind the scenes, not everyone could be expected to get along so well. While all the actors were able to put aside their differences for the sake of the show, there were still some tensions when the cameras weren't rolling. Melissa Sue Anderson played Mary Ingalls, the older sister of Melissa Gilbert's Laura. While the two appeared quite close in the show, they didn't get along at all behind the scenes. While nobody knows the exact reason for the feud, whatever differences the two actors had ran deep. Even years after the show ended, neither actor was willing to extend a hand in the name of friendship. Melissa Gilbert explained her dislike towards Melissa Sue Anderson in Prairie Tale, where she explained that she was cold and bratty. However, we never got Melissa Sue Anderson's side of the story, so the real reason behind the feud may forever remain a mystery. While Melissa Gilbert and Melissa Sue Anderson had the most pronounced dislike towards each other, Melissa Gilbert wasn't alone in her feelings. Other cast members reportedly announced that Melissa Sue Anderson was icy towards them. However, some have speculated that due to Melissa Sue Anderson's protective mother and sheltered upbringing, she may not have learned how to behave in a friendly manner towards others. The cast members loved to joke around. Despite a few differences, most of the cast members had a great time together. Michael Landon was known for his practical jokes. Melissa Gilbert and Alison Arngrim learned a few tricks from Michael Landon. In one incident, they pranked their fellow actors by putting saran wrap over one of the toilets. William Olson and Laura Ingalls were siblings in real life. William Olson was played by Jonathan Gilbert, whose shared last name with Melissa Gilbert is no coincidence. In real life, the two were adopted siblings. Sadly, however, Melissa Gilbert revealed in her autobiography that the two became estranged later in life, despite their close upbringing. Some relationships fade over time. However, the two still have time to connect. Maybe someday they'll be as close as they were when they both acted in Little House on the Prairie. Little House on the Prairie ended tragically. Little House on the Prairie depicted what life was like for the Ingalls family living on a farm in Walnut Grove, Minnesota. Despite the uplifting tone, many of the episodes tackled tough issues like poverty, divorce, addiction, abuse, and alcoholism. But even with the show's unprecedented success, Little House on the Prairie's controversial ending still has fans talking about it today. Much of that talk is speculation as to why such a well-received show like Little House was canceled. Michael Landon, one of the lead actors as well as a director, writer, and producer for the show, explained exactly why it all came to a close. Michael Landon had a ton of involvement in directing Little House on the Prairie. A star for 14 years on TV Western Bonanza, Michael Landon starred opposite character actors like Lorne Greene and Dan Blocker. With such work under his belt, he was already a familiar face when he was brought in by NBC producer Ed Friendly. He was set to not just star, but also to direct the 1974 pilot of the family drama set in 1800s Minnesota. Michael Landon played Charles Ingalls, the patriarch of the Ingalls family. He was such a substantial participant in the show that he was a part of nearly every episode in the first 8 seasons. Landon starred in and produced the first 8 seasons before going fully behind the scenes for the final one, which saw a new family move into the Little House and Melissa Gilbert's Laura, now married, become the lead character. This final season was retooled as Little House, A New Beginning. Landon directed 90 out of 204 episodes. He even came up with the plot for the initial 2-hour pilot and the final episode. According to Allison Arngrim, who played the mischievous and spoiled Nellie Olson on the show, Michael Landon's directing style was unique, but he met his tragic end when he died from pancreatic cancer at age 54. He was known for being both charismatic and an extremely welcoming personality on the set of Little House on the Prairie. Michael acted like a father figure to both Melissa Sue Anderson and Melissa Gilbert, who played his daughters. Allison Arngrim opened up to Megyn Kelly in a 2018 interview on The Today Show, talking about Michael Landon's habitual pranking. She praised him for his warm sense of humor and recounted the story of how Landon once welcomed a female guest star on the set of Little House in the Prairie. Funniest bloopers. On the show, one of the funniest bloopers in the show is the obvious, at least in hindsight, inconsistency of Laura's pregnancy. According to Melissa Gilbert, who played Laura, and Lenny Parker, who runs a fan website, Laura was pregnant for an extended period, amounting to a little over a year. She first announced her pregnancy in a warm season, but by the following summer, she was still expecting. Another hilarious oversight is the appearance of Colonel Sanders, the founder of Kentucky Fried Chicken, in a Season 8 episode titled Wave of the Future. In this episode, Nellie's restaurant is turned into a franchise called Mrs. Sullivan, but she soon regrets it and tries to get out of the contract. Charles and Nellie help her by opening a competing restaurant. Colonel Sanders then offers Harriet a deal to open her own chicken franchise. But this is an anachronism, because Colonel Sanders wasn't born until 1890, and Kentucky Fried Chicken wasn't founded until 1952. And in case you forgot, the show is supposed to be set in the 1870s and 1880s. In an episode titled The Odyssey from Season 5, an intense moment unfolds as an unknown assailant attempts to throw Albert off a moving train. But amidst the gripping scene, an amusing blooper emerges as the dramatic sequence plays out. Keen-eyed viewers can spot a peculiar sight. A dummy, instead of a living person, is hurled from the train, landing gracefully in the grass. Meanwhile, the fearless stuntman gracefully rolls down the hill, surpassing the stationary dummy in a comical contrast. Amidst the earnestness of the Little House on the Prairie set, laughter and hijinks often found their way into the lives of the cast members. One such purveyor of pranks was none other than the talented Michael Landon. As was later revealed by Rachel Greenbush, who portrayed the youngest Ingalls sibling, Carrie, during an interview she gave several years ago, Greenbush shared with a bit of a twinkle in her eye that Landon was a big practical joker. The mischievous duo of Greenbush and her on-screen sister Melissa Gilbert would venture off to the creek during breaks, embarking on frog-catching escapades with their tiny amphibian friends in tow. They would return to the set to deliver their slimy surprises to Landon. In a gleeful act of deception, Landon would take the unsuspecting amphibians and place them in his mouth. Approaching fellow cast and crew members with a mischievous grin, he would open his mouth, allowing the frog to spring forth and send those around him into fits of startled panic. The strange things that happened in the show. A subtle but noticeable blooper in the show is the presence of noisy tree branches outside the front upstairs window next to the girl's bed. In at least 2 episodes, The Monster of Walnut Grove and The Music Box, the branches can be seen and heard moving and rustling as if there is a strong wind outside. But there's no such tree near the house in any other scene of the show. This is likely a result of using stock footage or a sound effect to create some atmosphere. A curious mistake some observant fans have noticed is the family quilt that seems to magically change its location. It can be seen on Olsen's bed, Charles's parents' bed, and even on the bed of other characters throughout the series. The quilt is mostly white with small blocks, forming a design similar to the double wedding ring quilt. Other quilts also appear in different locations, suggesting that the show reused some props and costumes. Anachronistic clothing in the show. A common blooper that affects many historical shows is the anachronism of clothing and hairstyles. Some characters on Little House on the Prairie wear clothes or have hairstyles that are not appropriate for the 1870s and 1880s. For example, in some episodes, Caroline can be seen wearing a bra, which was not invented until 1912. Additionally, some of the women have perms for curls that are more typical of the 1970s than the 1880s. Melissa Gilbert herself acknowledges that her hair was often too long and too modern for her character. One particular case has stood out among fans of Little House on the Prairie. The show's subreddit page, Gorosaurus Rex, a Reddit user, fondly recalls their all-time favorite character, Albert, and highlighted a perplexing inconsistency in the made-for-TV movie. The story implied that Albert met his demise, but in another episode, it was stated he grew up to become the esteemed doctor of Walnut Grove. This discrepancy has always bothered fans, including Gorosaurus Rex, who had apparently mentioned it more than a few times to their boyfriend as a remarkable anniversary surprise. Their thoughtful partner arranged for Melissa Gilbert, the actress who played Laura Ingalls, to send a personalized video message addressing the continuity confusion and providing her own explanation. In her response, Gilbert acknowledged the perplexing situation and shared a delightful, tongue-in-cheek explanation for it. At the time, no one seemed concerned about the conflicting stories, and Gilbert humorously suggested her own imaginative twist. She proposed that Albert did meet his fate in the movie, but in a whimsical turn, he returned to the town as a zombie. Yep, an undead doctor who served Walnut Grove. A timeless mistake in the show. In the grand finale of Little House on the Prairie, aptly titled The Last Farewell, a notable continuity mistake catches the observant eye. The episode is set in 1901, over a decade after the events depicted in the final season. Logically speaking, most of the adults who graced the screens in the earlier seasons would have aged into their 60s and 70s by this time. In fact, the real-life Charles Ingalls sadly passed away just a year later, in 1902. Furthermore, the children who appeared in the final seasons, including Carrie, Jenny, Nancy, James, and Cassandra, would have grown into young adults during this time. Yet, curiously, no one on the show seems to have aged significantly. It's as if time stood still, freezing the characters in a perpetual state of youthfulness. The inconsistency is particularly evident when we consider Laura's voiceover in the Season 9 premiere, when she mentions it's the spring of 1887, a full 14 years prior to the events in The Last Farewell. But it feels as if only a couple of years have elapsed in the lives of the characters. About Michael Landon tough beginning. Landon was born to Eugene Maurice Orowitz on October 31, 1936, in Forest Hills, a neighborhood of Queens, New York. In 1941, when Landon was 4, he and his family moved to the borough of Collingswood, New Jersey. He attended and celebrated his bar mitzvah at Temple Beth Shalom. During his childhood, Landon was constantly worrying about his mother, attempting to end her own life. He reported that on a family beach vacation, his mother tried to drown herself, but Landon rescued her. Stress overload from the attempts of his mother caused Landon to battle the childhood problem of bedwetting, which was reported in the unauthorized biography Michael Landon, His Triumph and Tragedy. His mother put his wet sheets on display outside his window for all to see. Which Little House on the Prairie star got richest after it ended? Landon's net worth is estimated to be $1 million as of January 2023. He left $8 million to $10 million to each of his 9 children, according to People magazine. His namesake, Michael Landon Jr., went on to become a successful producer and director. He arranged to leave each of his 9 children between $8 million and $10 million and preemptively discouraged fighting among them. Karen Grassel played Caroline Ingalls, the mother of 3 daughters on the show. Though Grassel found success in the acting sphere outside of Little House, she never had a more notable role than she did in the show. After Little House ended, Grassel went on to star in productions such as Harry's War and Wyatt Earp, and today, she's still involved with film. Still, her net worth isn't nearly as much as other Hollywood television stars, coming in at around $500,000. Melissa Gilbert boasts a net worth of $500,000. Beyond her celebrated acting career, Gilbert's financial journey has been marked by both triumphs and tribulations, offering a nuanced perspective on fame, fortune, and personal resilience. In a surprising turn of events, Gilbert ventured into politics in 2016, running as a Democratic candidate for Michigan's 8th congressional district. Despite facing health challenges that led to the suspension of her campaign, Gilbert's foray into public service underscored her commitment to civic engagement and advocacy beyond the realm of entertainment. On the other hand, reports estimate Lindsay and Sidney Greenbush are worth somewhere between $1 million and $5 million combined. But amongst all of them, Michael Landon was worth far more than any of his Little House co-stars at the time of his death in 1991. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and check out another of our interesting videos before you leave.